Good morning to everyone with Bhagavad Gita. VOI Vivo verses 17 on second chapter. So we will start verse 18th on the seventh day. Let's start. The material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end. Therefore, fight, O descendant of Bharat. The material body is perishable by nature. It may perish immediately, or it may do so after 100 years. It is a question of only. There is no chance of maintaining it attentively, but the spirit soul is so minute that it cannot even be seen by an enemy, to say nothing of being killed. As mentioned in the previous verse, it is so small that no one can have any idea how to measure its dimension. So, from both viewpoints, there is no cause of lamentation, because the living entity as he is cannot be killed, nor can the material body be saved for any length of time or permanently protect. The minute particle of the whole spirit acquires the material body according to his work, and therefore observance of religious principles should be utilized. In the Vedanta Sutra, the living entity is qualified as light because he is part and parcel of the supreme light. As sunlight maintains the entire universe, so the light of the soul maintains this material body. As soon as the spirit soul is out of this material body, the body begins to decompose. Therefore, it is the spirit soul which maintains this body. The body itself is unimportant. Arjuna was advised to fight and not sacrifice the cause of religion for material bodily consideration. Next, verses 19. Neither he who thinks the living entity the slayer, nor he who thinks it slain is in knowledge. For the self slays not, nor is slain. When he embodied living entity is hurt by fatal weapons, it is to be known that the living entity within the body is not killed. The spirit soul is so small that it is possible to kill him by any material weapon, as will be evident from subsequent verses. Nor is the living entity killable because of his spiritual constitution. What is killed or is supposed to be killed is the body only. This, however, does not at all encourage killing of the body. The Vedic injunction is never commit violence to anyone, nor does understanding that the living entity is not killed encourage animal slaughter. Killing the body of anyone without authority is abominable and is punishable by the law of the state as well as by the law of the Lord. Arjun, however, is being engaged in killing for the principle of religion and not whimsically. Whimsically. Next verse is 20. For the soul there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and it will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. Qualitatively, the small atomic fragmental part of the Supreme Spirit is one with the Supreme. He undergoes no change. Like the body, sometimes the soul is called the steady, or the body is subject to 6 kinds of transformations. It takes its birth from the womb of the mother's body, remains for some time, grows, produces some effects, gradually dwindles, and at last vanishes into oblivion. The soul, however, does not go through such changes. The soul is not born, but because he takes on a material body, the body takes its birth. The soul does not take birth there, and the soul does not die. Anything which has birth also has death. And because the soul has no birth, he therefore has no past, no present or future. He is eternal, ever existing, and primeval. That is, there is no trace in history of his coming into being. Under the impression of the body, we seek the history of birth, etc., of the soul. The soul does not at any time become old, as the body does. The so called old man therefore feels himself to be in the same spirit as in his childhood or youth. The changes of the body do not affect the soul. The soul does not deteriorate like a tree, nor anything material. The soul has no byproduct either. The byproducts of the body, namely children, are so different individual souls, and owing to the body, they appear as children of a particular man. The body develops because of the soul's presence, but the soul has neither offshoots nor change. Therefore, the soul is free from the 6th change of the body. In the Katha Upanishad, we also find a similar passage which reads, the meaning and purport of this verse is the same as in Bhagavad Gita. But here in this verse, there is one special word, vipasit, which means learnt or with knowledge. The soul is full of knowledge or full always with consciousness. Therefore, consciousness is the symptom of the soul. Even if one does not find the soul within the heart where he is situated, one can still understand the presence of the soul simply by the presence of consciousness. Sometimes we do not find the sun in the sky owing to clouds or for some other reason, but the light of the sun is always there, and we are convinced that it is there for the time. As soon as there is a little light in the sky early in the morning, we can understand that the sun is in the sky. Similarly, since there is some consciousness in all bodies, whether man or animal, when we can understand the presence of the soul, this consciousness of the soul is, however, different from the consciousness of the Supreme, because the Supreme consciousness is all knowledge, past, present, and future. The consciousness of the individual soul is prone to be forgetful. When he is forgetful of his real nature, he obtains education and enlightenment from the superior lessons of Krishna. But Krishna is not like the forgetful soul. Krishna is not like the forgetful soul. If so, Krishna's teachings of Bhagavad Gita would be useless. There are two kinds of souls, namely the minute partial soul, Anuatma, and the super soul, Vibhuatma. There is also confirmed in the Katha Upanishad. In this way, both the super soul, Paramatma, and the atomic soul, Jivatma, are situated on the same tree of the body, within the same heart of the living beings, and only one who has become free from all material desires as well as limitations can, by the grace of the Supreme, understand the glories of the soul. Krishna is the fountainhead of the super soul, also as it will be disclosed in the following chapters. And Arjun is the atomic soul, forgetful of his real nature. Therefore, he requires to be enlightened by Krishna or by his bona fide representative, the spiritual master. 21 verse say, O Part, how can a person who knows that the soul is indestructible, eternal, unborn, and immutable, kill anyone or cause anyone to kill? Everything has its proper utility, and a man who is situated in complete knowledge knows how and where to apply a thing for its proper utility. Similarly, violence also has its utility, and how to apply violence rests with the person in knowledge. Although the justice of the peace awards capital punishment to a person condemned for murder, the justice of the peace cannot be blamed because he orders violence to another person. According to the courts of justice in Manu Samhita, the law book for mankind, it is supported that a murderer should be condemned to death, so that in his next life he will not have to suffer for the great sin he has committed. Therefore, the king's punishment of hanging a murderer is actually beneficial. Similarly, when Krishna orders fighting, it must be concluded that violence is for supreme justice, and thus Arjun should follow the instruction, knowing well that such violence committed in the act of fighting for Christian is not violence at all, because at any rate the man, or rather the soul, cannot be killed. So, for the administrations of justice, so called violence is permitted. A surgical operation is not meant to kill the patient but to cure him. Therefore, the fighting to be executed by Arjun at the instruction of Krishna is with full knowledge. So, there is no possibility of sinful reaction. Wow. Now, next 22nd verse. As a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. Change the body by the atomic individual soul is an accepted fact. Even the modern scientists who do not believe in the existence of the soul, but at the same time cannot explain the source of energy from the heart, have to accept continuous change of body, which appear from childhood to boyhood, and from boyhood to youth, and again from youth to old age. From old age, the change is transferred to another body. This has already been explained in a previous verse. Transference of the atomic individual soul to another body is made possible by grace of the super soul. The super soul fulfills the desire of the atomic soul as one friend fulfills the desire of another. The Veds, like Mundaka Upanishad as well as Sevats Vatra Upanishad, compare the soul and the super soul to two friendly birds sitting on the same tree. One of the birds, the individual atomic soul, is eating the fruit of the tree, and the other bird, Krishna, is simply watching his friend. Of these two words, although they are the same in quality, one is captivated by the fruits of the material tree, while the other is simply witnessing the activities of his friend. Krishna is the witnessing bird and Arjun is the eating bird. Although they are friends, one is still the master and the other is the servant. Forgetfulness of this relationship by the atomic soul is the cause of one's changing his position from one tree to another, or from one body to another. The Jeev soul is struggling very hard on the tree of the material body, but as soon as he agrees to accept the other bird as a supreme spiritual master, as Arjun agreed to do by voluntary surrender unto Krishna for instruction, the subordinate bird immediately becomes free from all limitations. Both the Mundaka Upanishad and Sevtasvatra Upanishad confirm this. Although the two words are in the same tree, the eating bird is fully engrossed with anxiety or morosence as the enjoyer of the fruits of the tree. But if in some way or other he turns his face to his friend who is the Lord and knows his glories, at once the suffering bird becomes free from all anxieties. Arjun has now turned his face toward his eternal friend Krishna and is the understanding the Bhagavad Gita from him, and thus hearing from Krishna is can understand the supreme glories of the Lord and be free from lamentation. Arjun is advised herewith by the Lord not to lament for the bodily change of his old grandfather and his teacher. He should rather be happy to kill their bodies in the righteous fight so that they may be cleansed at once of all reactions from various bodily activities. One who lays down his life on the sacrificial altar or in the proper battlefield is at once cleansed of bodily reaction and promoted to a higher status of life. So, there was no cause for Arjun's lamentation. Verse 23, 23rd. The soul can never be cut to pieces by any weapon, nor burnt by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by the wind. All kinds of weapons, swords, flame weapons, rain weapons, tornado weapons, etc., are unable to kill the spirit soul. It appears that there were many kinds of weapons made of earth, water, air, other, etc. In addition to the modern weapons of fire, even the nuclear weapons of the modern age are classified as fire weapons, but formerly there were other weapons made of all different types of material elements. Firearms were contracted by water weapons which are now unknown to modern science. No do modern scientists have knowledge of tornado weapons. Nonetheless, the soul can never be cut into pieces, nor annihilated by any number of weapons, regardless of scientific devices. The Mayavadi cannot explain how the individual soul came into existence simply by ignorance and consequently became covered by illusory energy. Nor was it ever possible to cut the individual souls from the original Supreme Soul. Rather, the individual souls are eternally separated parts of the Supreme Soul. Because they are atomic individual souls, eternally Sanatan, they are prone to be covered by the illusory energy, and thus they become separated from the association of the Supreme Lord, just as a spark of fire, although one in quality with the fire, are prone to be extinguished when out of the fire in the Vrahpuran. The living entities are described as separated parts and parcels of the Supreme. They are eternally so, according to the Bhagavad Gita also, so even after being liberated from illusion. The living entity remains a separate identity as evident from the teachings of the Lord to Arjun. Arjun became liberated by the knowledge received from Krishna, but he never became one with Krishna. Next verse is 24th. This individual soul is unbreakable and insoluble and can be neither burnt nor dried. He is everlasting, present everywhere, unchangeable, immovable, and eternally the same. All these qualifications of the atomic soul definitely prove that the soul, individual soul, is eternally the atomic particle of the spirit whole, and he remains the same atom eternally without change. The theory of monism is very difficult to apply in this case because the individual soul is never expected to become one homogeneously. After liberation from material contaminations, the atomic soul may prefer to remain as a spiritual spark in the effulgent rays of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the intelligent souls enter into the spiritual planets to associate with the Personality of Godhead. The word Sarvagata, all pervading, is significant because there is no doubt that living entities are all over God's creation. They live on the land, in the water, in the air, within the earth, and even within fire. The belief that they are sterilized in fire is not acceptable because it is clearly stated here that the soul cannot be burnt by fire. Therefore, there is no doubt that there are living entities also in the sun planet with suitable bodies to live there. If the sun globe is uninhabited, then the word Sarvagata, living everywhere, becomes meaningless. Next verse is 25th. It is said that the soul is invisible, inconceivable, and immutable. Knowing this, he should not cry for the body. As described previously, the magnitude of the soul is so small for our material calculation that he cannot be seen even by the most powerful microscope. Therefore, he is invisible. As far as the soul's existence is concerned, no one can establish his existence experimentally beyond the proof of Shruti or Vedic wisdom. We have to accept this truth because there is no other source of understanding the existence of the soul. Although it is affected by perceptions, there are many things we have to accept solely on grounds of superior authority. No one can deny the existence of his father based upon the authority of his mother. There is no source of understanding the identity of the father except by the authority of the mother. Similarly, there is no source of understanding the soul except by studying the Veds. In other words, the soul is inconceivable, inconceivable by human experimental knowledge. The soul is consciousness, and conscious, that also is the statement of the Veds. And we have to accept that unlike the bodily changes, there is no change in the soul. As eternally unchangeable, the soul remains atomic in comparison to the infinite Supreme Soul. The Supreme Soul is infinite, and the atomic soul is infinitesimal. Therefore, the infinitesimal soul, being unchangeable, can never become equal to the infinite soul or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This concept is repeated in the Veds in different ways just to confirm the stability of the conception of the soul. Repetition of something is necessary in order that we understand the matter truly without error. Next verse is 26th. If, however, you think that the soul or the symptoms of life is always born and dies forever, you still have no reason to lament or mighty armed. There is always a class of philosophers almost akin to the Buddhists who do not believe in the separate existence of the soul beyond the body. When the Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita, it appears that such philosophers existed, and they were known as the Loktikas, Lokyatikas, and Sikas. Such philosophers maintain that the life symptoms take place at a certain mature condition of material combination. The modern material scientists and materialists philosophers also think similarly. According to them, the body is combination of physical elements, and at a certain stage of life symptoms developed by interaction of the physical and chemical elements. The science of anthropology is based on this philosophy. Currently, many pseudo-religions now becoming fashionable in America are also adhering to this philosophy, as well as to the nihilistic non-devotional Buddhist sects. Even if Arjun did not believe in the existence of the soul as in the Vaisheshik philosophy, there would still have been no cause for lamentations. No one laments the loss of a certain bulk of chemicals and stops discharging his prescribed duty. On the other hand, in modern science and scientific warfare, so many tons of chemicals are wasted for achieving victory over the enemy. According to the Vaisheshik philosophy, the so-called soul or Atma vanishes along with the deterioration of the body. So, in any case, whether Arjun accepted the Vedic conclusion that there is an atomic soul, or he did not believe in the existence of the soul, he had no reason to lament. According to this theory, Since there are so many living entities generating out of matter every moment, and so many of them are being vanquished every moment. There is no need to cry for such incidents. If there were no rebirth for the soul, Arjun had no reason to be afraid for being affected by sinful reaction due to his killing his grandfather and teacher. But at the same time, Krishna sarcastically addressed Arjun as Mahabhu, mighty armed, because he at least did not accept the theory of the Vivasik, which leaves aside the Vedic wisdom. As a Kshatriya, Arjun belonged to the Vedic culture, and it behooved him to continue to follow its principle. Next verse is 27. One who has taken his birth is sure to die, and further death one is sure to take birth again. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. One has to take birth according to one's activities of life, and after finishing one term of activities, one has to die to take birth for the next. In this way, one is going through one cycle of birth and death after another without liberation. This cycle of birth and death does not, however, support unnecessary murder, slaughter, and war. But at the same time, violence and war are inevitable factors in human society for keeping law and order. The Battle of Kurukshetra, being the will of the Supreme, was an inevitable event, and to fight for the right cause is the duty of a Kshatriya. Why should he be afraid of or aggrieved at the death of his relatives, since he was discharging his proper duty? He did not deserve to break the law, thereby becoming subject to the reactions of sinful acts of which he was so afraid. By avoiding this discharge of his proper duty, he would not be able to stop the death of his relatives, and he would be degraded due to his selections of the wrong path of action. Next verse is 28. All created beings are unmanifest in their beginning, manifest in their interim state, and unmanifest again when annihilated. So, what need is there for limitations? Accepting that there are two classes of philosophers, one believing in the existence of the soul and the other not believing in the existence of the soul. There is no cause for limitation in either case. Non-believers in the existence of the soul are called atheists by followers of Vedic wisdom. Yet, even if for argument's sake we accept the atheistic theory, there is still no cause for limitation. Apart from the separate existence of the soul, the material elements remain unmanifested before creation. From this subtle state of non manifestation comes manifestation, just as from other air is generated from air, fire is generated from fire, water is generated and from water. Earth becomes manifested from the earth. Many varieties of manifestation take place. Take for example, a big skyscraper manifested from the earth. When it is dismantled, the manifestation becomes again unmanifested and remains as storms in the ultimate stage. The law of conservation of energy remains, but in course of time, things are manifested and unmanifested. That is a difference than what causes there are limitation, either in the stage of limitation or in unmanifestation somehow or other, even in the unfested stage. Things are not lost. Both at the beginning and at the end, all elements remain unmanifested, and only in the middle are they manifested. And this does not make any real material difference. And if we accept the Vedic conclusion we started in the Bhagavad Gita, that these material bodies are perishable in due course of time, but that the soul is eternal, then we must remember always that the body is like a dress. Therefore, why lament the changing of a dress? The material body has no factual existence in relation to the eternal soul. It is something like a dream. In a dream, we may think of flying in the sky or sitting on a chariot as a king. But when we wake up, we can see that we are neither in the sky nor sit on the chariot. The Vedic wisdom encourages self-realization on the basis of the non-existence of the material body. Therefore, in either case, whether one believes in the existence of the soul or one does not believe in the existence of the soul, there is no cause for lamentations for loss of the body. Next verse is 29th. Some look on the soul as amazing, some describe him as amazing, and some hear of him as amazing, while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. Since Gita Upanishad is largely based on the principles of the Upanishad, it is not surprising to also find this passage in the Katha Upanishad. The fact that the atomic soul is within the body of a gigantic animal, in the body of a gigantic banyan tree, and also in the microbic germs, millions and billions of which occupy only an inch of space, is certainly very amazing man with a poor fund of knowledge. And men who are not austere cannot understand the words of the individual atomic spark of speech, even though it is explained by the greatest authoritative knowledge, who imparted lessons even of Brahma. The first living being is the universe, owing to a gross material conception of things. Most men in this age cannot imagine how such a small particles particle can become both so great and so small. So, man look at the soul proper as wonderful either by constitution or by prescription. Illusioned by the material energy, people are so engrossed in subject matters for sense gratification gratification that they have very little time to understand the questions of the self understanding, even though it is a fact that without this self understanding all activities result in ultimate defeat in the struggle for existence. Perhaps they have no idea that one must think of the soul and thus make a solution to the material miseries. Some people who are inclined to hear about the soul may be attending lectures in good association, but sometimes, owing to ignorance, they are misguided by acceptance of the super soul and the atomic soul as one without distinction of magnitude. It is very difficult to find a man who perfectly understands the positions of the super soul, the atomic soul, their respective functions and relationship, and all other major and minor details, and it is still more difficult to find a man who has actually derived full benefit from knowledge of the soul and who is able to describe the position of the soul in the different aspects. But if somehow or other one is able to understand the subject matter of the soul, then one's life is successful. The easiest process for understanding the subject matter of self, however, is to accept the statements of Bhagavad Gita, spoken by the greatest authority, Lord Krishna, without being deviated by other theories. But it also requires a great deal of penance, and sacrifice, either in this life or in the previous ones, before one is able to accept Krishna as a supreme personality of Godhead. Krishna can, however, be known as such by the causeless mercy of the pure devotee, and by no other way. Next verse is 30. O descendant, O descendant Bharat of Bharat, he who dwells in the body can never be slain. Therefore, you need not cry for any living being. The Lord now concludes the chapter of instructions on the immutable spirit soul in describing the immortal soul in various ways. Lord Krishna established that the soul is immortal and the body is temporary. Therefore, Arjun as a Kshatriya should not abandon his duty out of fear. And his grandfather and teacher, Bhishma and Drona will die in the battle. On the authority of Shri Krishna, one has to believe that there is soul different from the material body. Note that there is no such things as soul, or that living symptoms develop at a certain stage of material maturity resulting from the interactions of chemicals. Though The soul is immortal, violence is not encouraged, but at the time of war, it is not discouraged when there is actual need for it. That need must be justified in terms of the sanctions of the Lord and not capriciously. 31 verse. That's really very interesting. Considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles, and so there is no need for hesitation. One of the four orders of social administration, the second order for the matter of good administration, is called Kshatriya. Kshat means heart. One who gives protections from harm is called Kshatriya. To give protection, the Kshatriya are trained for killing in the forest. A Kshatriya would go into the forest and challenge a tiger face to face and fight with the tiger with his sword. When the tiger was killed, it would be offered the royal order of cremation. This system has been followed even up to the present day by Kshatriya kings of Jaipur state. The Kshatriyas are specially trained for challenging and killing because religious violence is sometimes a necessary factor. Therefore, Kshatriyas are never meant for accepting directly the order of sannyas or renunciations. Non-violence in politics may be a diplomacy, but it is never a factor or principle. In the religious law books, it is stated. In the battlefield, a king of Kshatriya, while fighting another king in view of him, is eligible for achieving heavenly planets after death, as the Brahmas also attain the heavenly planets by sacrificing animals in the sacrificial fire. Therefore, killing on the battlefield on religious principles and killing animals in the sacrificial fire are not at all considered to be acts of violence, because everyone is benefited by the religious principles involved. The animal sacrifice gets a human life immediately without undergoing the gradual evolutionary process from one form to another. And the Kshatriya killed on the battlefield also attain the heavenly planets, as to do Brahman, who attain them by offering sacrifice. There are two kinds of savadhrams, specific duties. As long as one is not liberated, one has to perform the duties of his particular body in accordance with religious principle in order to achieve liberation. When one is liberated, one's savadhram specific duty becomes spiritual and is not in the material bodily concept. In the bodily conception of life, there are specific duties for the Brahman and Kshatriyas respectively, and such duties are unavoidable. Savadhram is ordained by the Lord, and this will be clarified in the fourth chapter on the bodily plan. Savdharma is called Varnashram Dharma. Varnashram Dharma or man's stepping stone or spiritual understanding. Human civilizations begins from the stage of Varnashram Varnashram Dharma or specific duties in terms of the specific modes of nature of the body obtained. Discharging one's specific duty in any field of action in accordance with the orders of higher authorities serves to elevate one to a higher states of life. 32 verse. O Parth, happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come and shut opening for them the doors of the heavenly planets. As supreme teacher of the world, Lord Krishna condemns the attitude of Arjun, who said, I do not find any good in this fighting. It will cause perpetual habitation in hell. Such statements by Arjun were due to ignorance only. He wanted to become non-violent in the discharge of his specific duty. For a Kshatriya to be on the battlefield and to become non-violent in the philosophy of fools. In the religious codes made by Parshurama the great sage and father of Vyasadeva, it is started. The Kshatriya's duty is to protect the citizens from all kinds of difficulties, and for that reason he has to apply violence in suitable cases for law and order. Therefore, he has to conquer the soldiers of inimical kings, and thus, with religious principles, he should rule over the world. Considering all aspects, Arjun had no reason to refrain from fighting. If he should conquer his enemies, he would enjoy the kingdom, and if he should die in the battle, he would be elevated to the heavenly planets, whose doors were wide open to him. Fighting would be for the benefit in either case.